All right, Justin Hollandsworth is our guest this week, and I'm going to give you a quick intro because there's tons of good information. I want to be able to get you to it. So here is what we covered. The moon. Do you buy into the moon from a hunting perspective? Justin does. I do. He really goes deep into it. So great conversation around the moon. We talked about trail camera strategy. It's different than you think it is. He's kind of moving away from cell cameras from the standpoint of utilizing them to plan hunting and more from an inventory standpoint. Good conversation there. We did a scenario focused around the Midwest, CRP, ponds, and some fingers in a timber patch. Just kind of a latest scenario out there. How would you approach it? How would you set up on it? How would you scout? That was a great conversation. And then last but not least, we talked about travel hunting. When you hit a brand new spot, what do you do first? When do you get aggressive? When do you lay back? What's the best thing that you can do to optimize your time when you have a limited amount of days and you're hunting out of state? Great conversation with Justin. He is a member of Whitetail Addictions. He's been with Lone Wolf Custom Gear for over 20 years. He's part of that crowd, some of the best hunters in the country, tons of experience. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Thanks for tuning in. As always, please, if you're on YouTube, give me a like, subscribe to the channel. Would love it if you would share it. If you're over on Spotify and Apple, subscribe or follow if you haven't already done so. Please leave a comment, give a rating. That's super awesome. One of the other things that I'm starting to do now, any product that gets discussed during the podcast, there will be links to the bottom to Amazon or places where you can purchase those products just to give it an easy shot for you to get over there. Yes, I make a little bit of dough off of it, but it pays for basically the equipment in this podcast studio and nothing more. But if you're going to buy it, I'd appreciate you using the links and buying it through the podcast. Thanks so much. Enjoy it, and hope you like the conversation with Justin. Justin, thanks for jumping on the podcast, brother. Appreciate you being here, man.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I feel like we kind of did half the podcast already.
That's the problem with these. All the good conversations start up beforehand.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to actually piggyback off some of the stuff you were talking about already. Just so there's a lot of people out there that have not been hunting their whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm going to start with a couple questions. One for experienced hunters, one for people who have only been hunting, a few years, like 2 to 5 years. So let's start with the people who are experienced. And this is a question I've asked a lot of people like coming out of last season. If you kind of look back on the last couple seasons for you, as someone who's done this a lot, what are a few things that you've either done more of that you're like, yes, I'm going to continue to elevate that? Or what are some things that you kind of look back at and like, hey, I tried that. That didn't really give me the result I was looking for, and I'm not doing as much of that. So just basically some things that you're going to lean into in this upcoming season.
I would say the thing that I'm definitely going to do a lot more of, and something that I've definitely gotten back into probably in the last, 5 or 6 years, maybe longer. I don't know. Is how important it is to, use some long range scouting. And when I say long range scouting, I don't mean with a trail camera or a cell camera or anything like that, because that's only capturing like a quick moment in time, and you can be very fooled by looking at those pictures or getting that information consistently like that. To me, I think when you can, I mean, this isn't for everyone. I think, if you're in a lot of big, timber area and stuff like that, I don't know if this is an option, but whenever you can use some glass and get behind a spotting scope or binoculars, you're going to learn far more by that observation over a trail camera or cell cam, whatever. That gives you a better. So when you do to make you go to make the move, you're making a more of an educated move, and you're going to be set up more correctly based off of what the animal is doing.
Yeah, I've heard you talk about that quite a bit, like the last, I don't know, year and a half. I think you started talking about that a little bit at the end of 2023, but even more last year, like going back more to some SD cameras, not, counting on or not chasing, photos on cell cameras. And I think you said this too before we even started, not feeling like you have to be in the woods hunting constantly, like recognizing the advantages that come out of glassing and essentially scouting, without getting in there.
Yeah, because I feel like once you commit to going in, um, you don't have a lot of opportunities in there. I think that it's it's a matter of time before he is on to you. I think that setting back a little bit sometimes is the better route. But when you do go in, don't go in to set back again, because I see guys do that as well, where they're making this observation, they're watching this animal. Then when it comes time to make the move, well, they don't want to go too far. I mean, you have to go all in when you finally do make that move, because at the end of the day, we all want to, you know, we want a 20-yard shot at the end of the day. I've had that backfire on me too, where I'm like, okay, I've seen the animal and this is what he's doing. So I'm going to go in and get set up. Well, I'm going to set back just a little bit because I don't want to go too far into that spot or whatever. And then the next thing you know, you go in, you see the animal, and you never get a shot. Now it gets dark and you got to get down and get out of there with that animal in there. And there's, unless he's completely cleared out of there and is long way away, I mean, there's a good chance that he's going to be, he's going to hear you, see you, whatever it might be. Or you also take the chance too of, yeah, maybe he did clear out of there, but maybe he came back through the night and and just picked up your ground scent, stuff like that. So I don't like to give them too much credit because they are an animal at the end of the day, but I don't want to give them not enough credit either. So there's a little balancing act in between there, just finding that fine line to ride.
When you're doing that, Justin, and you're like, okay, I'm going to put some time behind glass. What what are you looking for? What are a couple things, for people that maybe aren't doing that much or haven't done that much? What are you utilizing that observation for to give you insight into? Like, what are you looking at and going, okay, this is really what I'm trying to figure out a few things.
So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll just and on my phone in my notes, I will before the deer start moving and I'm set up. The one thing that I will do is I'll write, I'll mark down like what the wind and stuff like that was doing.
Mm-hmm.
um, just to start to kind of keep tabs on that. Then if I see the buck, then I I'll put some notes in there like where he came out of and where he worked to, and then I will just kind of continue that and kind of come up with a plan because not most of the time they're going to come out with some kind of either visual, um, depending on where you're hunting, or some kind of wind based decision is why they're doing what they're doing. And so I'm trying to figure out, is he okay? Is he coming out on a northwest wind over here? Is he coming out on a southwest wind over here, or whatever it might be? But then I'm also trying to narrow it down to, okay, is he bedding very far in there, and is he using his eyes on this particular wind to bed in that location? So I'm trying to kind of rule out everything and trying to narrow down to what exactly is making him move, and daylight hours. But the other thing that I want to do too is I want to narrow down, when he comes out, where's he heading to and why? Because I personally, like, October is my favorite. time of the year. I would much rather get it done in October, because I think the rut's a wild card, and you just don't ever know where they're going to be and what they're going to be doing. And I mean, it can be a real crapshoot. It's a Sometimes if you're hunting a specific buck, I think it's a very frustrating time to do that. So if you do have a particular buck that you're after, I think October is the month to do it. I think
Right.
October and January are the 2 months. Um, so I want to be able to narrow down, okay, is he going over to these white oaks, or is he going over to, maybe there's some, apple trees or whatever it might be that he's working to. I want to figure that out. And just take all that information, kind of stack it in my favor.
So you've got that. That was kind of okay. Experienced guys. Is there anything else that you're going to really be focusing on this season, or do you want to go into a couple tips for some newer guys?
I don't think there's anything, I guess, particular that I'm going to be focusing on this year. I'm always focusing on a couple different bucks, but
So from the standpoint of what's really worked for you, or I listened to that. I think it was a podcast you did with Mark Kenyon a couple of years ago, and you were talking about a specific buck that you shot on the ground, that was bedded down on a fence line. Have you done more ground hunting since then? Like, is that something that you're more open to, or was that more of a unique situation?
that was just more of a unique situation. That was like a one off. Honestly, that's the only buck I've ever shot on the ground. Um,
Gotcha.
he just happens to be my biggest, but um, it was the it was the perfect situation with the wind, how wet the ground was, where he was bedded with that doe on that fence row. Like, I didn't even know there was a doe over there until I got closer later. I assumed that's why he was out in the middle of nowhere like that. Um, but I will say that was being 28 yards away from him on the ground. I would like to do that again. I can promise you that. That was
I was gonna
pretty
say
cool.
that had to be pretty cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how are you, like, have you moved away from, or what's your camera strategy now at this point? I've heard you say a few times that you're relying less on cell cameras, that you were doing back kind of more with doing more with SD cameras again. How are you utilizing both of those now?
The SD cameras that I have, I don't I run all of them on video mode. I don't run them on picture mode at all, just because that snapshot sometimes doesn't quite tell me the whole story. I feel like I get much more from video, where they're coming and going. And so I do a lot of that, do on scrapes primarily, or if I'm like trying to narrow down a buck, and maybe I'm not picking him up by being able, by being able to glass or whatever, then I might set a couple cameras up on video mode to try to catch that, movement. Now I use a lot of cell cams, but I will say that strategy is drastically changed. Um, I used to do this whole thing, and I think a lot of guys fell in this trap where if it was like all the moves I was making was like based off of these cell cams and pictures I was getting, and it was like it's just such a huge mistake. I know for sure that it definitely hurt me and definitely made me get away from just some of the basic woodsmanship and stuff like that that I knew, but I it was almost like I was almost like abandoning that woodsmanship, and was like just so relying on those cell cams, where cell camera to me now is just, okay, I got a picture of the deer. I just know that he's still around. It's an inventory only tool, and I think that's all that it should be used for. Because um, sure, are guys gonna, on a bait pile or something like that? Are they gonna shoot bucks that are coming into a cell cam on a bait pile and stuff like that? Sure. I mean, it happens. I live in Ohio, and I mean, I know guys that if you took one of the two things away from them, um, it'd be very interesting. Um, it would be. I would
It's
be.
like ring the bell, right?
Yeah, I would be. It'd be interesting to watch, to see if they made the transition and started going back to maybe some ways that they used to do things. Um,
Hmm.
and to me, I'm not going to get on the baiting kick, but and I'm not saying that I don't bait because I live in a state that is just full of bait piles everywhere you look. Um, but if they took it away tomorrow, I'd be very happy. I'll just say that.
So if you're on the ones that you are running video on, obviously those eat batteries up pretty quick. So you don't worry about going back in and changing those batteries, or do you just pretty much put it in and let it run, get what you can get, and then kind of let it sit until the right time?
No, I kind of, a lot of times I'll put them in spots that if I do need to get to them, then I'm not blowing up the place.
Hmm.
But I do. I mean, I guess I will run. I will run some SD cameras, as soakers every year.
Yeah.
Um, I do that. Where I'll put them out, like in say August or September or something like that. And I'll just let them ride. The frustrating part about that is I don't know how many times I've pulled those carbs before, and if I would have checked them long before that, um, it I would have been in the game much sooner, or maybe onto a particular buck that I didn't know was in there for a week or two or whatever
Yeah.
it might be. Um, I do think it's a pretty good tool to be able to use for a lot of historical data. Like say you're just building up that, like you got a particular buck that you've been watching for, a few years or whatever. Or maybe he was just a 3-year old. Now he's a 4-year old and moving into 5-year old or whatever. I do think if you know, um, you can use definitely some of that information, um, against them later, as long as you're, doing a good job documenting that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
But typically the cameras that I have on video mode, um, it's more. I don't a lot of times put them in spots that I is going to be touchy, real touchy to get into and stuff like that. Um,
Yeah.
I'll kind of back them off. I just want that movement. I just want to catch, how they're traveling in and out of an area. Um, Sometimes I wish they had a camera out there that picked up, you know, that that motion from 100 yards away or something like that. I mean, I think that would be some freaking awesome technology if that ever came along, because you could back those cameras up. Because I've also had that experience where I've had those cameras in there, and some deer are just different about cameras. Some deer are like, it's almost like they like having their picture taken, and others are like, if you don't have it up high and out of their line of sight, man, they're super skittish with it.
Yeah, I can't remember the brand, but I was looking through. I think it was the most recent bowhunter. The gear issue, and
Hmm.
there's a camera in there. It's not a brand I recognize, but there's a camera in there that has a zoom lens on it. And
Oh,
I don't think
really?
it. I don't. Yeah, I don't know that it doesn't. It doesn't do 100 yards, but supposedly, you can set it back further, and then it actually, will zoom in on whatever it picks up and adjust the picture.
We partnered this year with Stealth Cams. I have the Stealth 360 revolver.
Oh yeah, I've loved to hear about that because I looked at that and was like, I don't know, I wonder if that works. How does that like? How was your experience with that?
So we just started getting cameras. So I got some set before turkey season this year, and I got
Okay.
a particular. Well, I got a couple. I had one particular plot that I had in Standing Beans last year. So when I went over there, it was like a turkey strategy. So I went in there and I tilled up that whole thing because I knew they'd be out there pecking around in that. And I stuck that camera. in the center of that 2 acre plot. And,
Mm-hmm.
and that thing is pretty slick because anything that, that motions in that, in that whole entire field and triggers that, it also, it takes a picture, obviously 360 degrees. But the cool thing about it, like the picture that triggered the camera, I noticed there was times where I was looking at the pictures and there'd be because it marks the picture that took that motioned.
Right.
And so I noticed on, looking, there would be another picture from those five that came in, and I would see like a big Tom like 100 yards away strutting. That
Didn't show up on the other one.
yeah. So if like I would have never known that. I'm gonna be like, I think it's gonna be a really cool camera come this bow season, because especially like in November, you have a doe that triggers your trail camera, and then that's the only picture that you got. But now with this, maybe that big bruiser that you're after is like on one of the other pictures that you would have never known was there. So I like that camera a lot. Battery life's really good on it too.
When it takes the picture, does it create like a panoramic photo out of the whole thing, or does it just give you a sequence of photos that from all the way around the camera?
From all the way around the camera, it'll give you, so like it notifies you on your phone, you open up the app, and then it'll give you like 5 pictures in a row. And the
Okay,
picture that set the camera off is marked.
gotcha.
So you can check that one, but then you can go through and check every other one. And I've noticed that, I mean, there was a day there I had a hen that motioned the camera, and then I was checking through the pictures, and then 20 yards on the backside of the camera, there's three toms strutting in that field that I would have never, that I didn't know was around. So I think that thing's pretty cool. I like that camera.
I mean, that would potentially, it seems like, also not eliminate, but create situations where you may not need to run video as much because you're
Yeah.
able to see, what's going on in the surrounding area, especially if you've got it set to take, I don't know, I mean, you could set it 5 seconds apart, 10 seconds apart. You could actually figure out, some travel routes from that because it's getting stuff from a 360 as opposed to like, okay, like I use reveal, but if I'm not using a video and I'm not taking like a flash shot, lots of times you'll get one shot. And even if you got it set for three, by the time the second or third one kicks off, they're out of the frame.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it seems like that's going to give you a lot better intel.
Yeah. Especially on those big spots like that, where,
Wide
where
open.
you're trying to cover
Yeah.
an area, and
You
it's
just can't do
hard.
it with one camera pointing straight out.
No, no, and I
Yeah.
and I don't know how many times I've been in a stand too where I've seen the buck that I'm after, and watched him for 30 minutes that night, and had cameras in and around that field and never got one picture of the deer ever.
I had that happen multiple times last year. What he walked like literally within 10 feet of me and didn't show up on the camera.
Yeah, and it wasn't anything it wasn't that the camera malfunctioned or anything like that. It was just that deer just didn't walk, just directly in front of that camera. and and I mean, this kind of goes back to what I was talking about before. It's like guys that are, going so much on these cameras, I mean, they have to walk right in front of that thing. And um you could be missing everything. And that's why, to me, again, like going back to, you know relying more on my eyesight versus those cameras, I think you're just way better off. I mean, it's just honestly just getting back to like basic woodsmanship as of being observer and then making a move next.
Yeah. Hey guys, big thanks to Osseo Gear for supporting the show. Osseo is built specifically for bow hunters. Every stitch, zipper, and fabric choice is made to perform when it's quiet and the pressure's on. Their camo patterns are inspired by nature's predators, and they're purpose built to ensure you blend naturally into the specific environment you are hunting. Make sure to use the code DO NOT GO20 to get 20% off on your purchases at OsseoGear.com. Osseo is made for bow hunters by bow hunters. So give them a check. They're a big supporter of the podcast, and we appreciate them. Great gear. So I did hear, I think I was on a different interview you did. You were asked about the moon and whether you believed in the moon or not as it impacts hunting, and you said yes, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So the one I was listening to didn't really go into it. It was just kind of like, yes, it was one of those rapid fire things. I'd love to hear more about your thoughts about the moon, where you utilize it, how you think it impacts, animals, when it impacts them. Are you using the moon guide? Or are you using something else? How do you incorporate that into everything?
I do. I definitely use them. I definitely use the moon. And I do believe in the moon guide. I've killed a lot of bucks on those red moons. And I definitely think that, Jeff Murray was onto something. Now Adam has it. And, and I definitely think there's something to that. This is just what I've experienced. There is a time frame where the moon is rising leading into a full moon. And there is about 5 days in there leading into the full moon that for evening hunts, I definitely think it triggers animals I think it triggers animals and fish to feed. I mean, there's there's no way around it. I mean, it's no different than, it's the middle of summer and you're driving down the road. It's 1 o'clock in the summer. It's 90 degrees out, and you're just, oh man, why are all these deer out in these fields in the middle of the day like this? 9 times out of 10, it's the moon. And so, it doesn't have anything to do with the rut or whatever, anything like that, because it's the middle of summer. Now, I think there's a span in between that full moon, which is about 3 or 4 days of, of that full moon. Then you start coming on the backside of that moon. And once you get on the backside, there's another 5 day span, roughly somewhere in there, that I think morning hunts are just fantastic then. And I don't care if it's early season or the rut or late season or whatever. I do think there's a span in there where it's favorable for the mornings. I don't hunt a lot of mornings in the early part of season. I don't hunt mornings during the late season, just because it's just too impossible to get close to them, because they've been pressured pretty hard by now. And if you're anywhere close to a food source, you're going to get cracked. In late season, it's just, I think you get it's a 1 or 2 shot deal, and that's it. And I think there's another time frame in there, and it all depends on, there's a lot of factors that go into all this, but the weather trumps everything. I don't, there's just no way around it. I mean, the weather does. Have I shot bucks when it was 90 degrees out? Yeah. you know, um, but, those were, you know, because I had glass on the deer, and maybe the moon was favorable, and he was just doing what he was doing. And your eyes don't lie, so you gotta strike while the iron's hot. So, but on the other side of that, with the moon, there's also another stage that comes in there where it can be really dynamite, especially depending on the year or the time of year, especially in November. Is if you have a red moon, say anywhere in that 10 to 2 time frame, and you have the weather to go along with it, and it's November, it can be dynamite. I mean, it can be
That's actually what I was about to ask you was time, like timing on. Did you see any difference in time? Like if it's an evening hunt, when do you, when are you getting in on a red moon? If it's a morning hunt, like how long are you staying? That's so keep going on that because that was going to be my next question.
So I had a hunt a few years ago in Illinois, and the moon was going to be the peak moon was going to be around 10:30, like 10:30 to 11:30 that day. And I thought about going out later in the day, but um, I was on an out of state trip, and I was like, yeah, I'm gonna go in. And so I went in, and I set that first part of the morning, and it was dead. I mean, dead as a doornail
What time did you go in? You went in before light?
before light,
Okay.
and it was dead. I mean, there wasn't squat going on. And then about I seen a couple of deer here and there, and whatever. But around probably around 11 o'clock that day, from like from 11 to noon, it was it was buck after buck after buck. I mean, nonstop. I seen the buck that I was after. I had him at 30 something yards. I just didn't, it was too thick in there and I couldn't get a shot. But just one after another, and I was seeing good bucks. I mean, and it was on. And it stayed kind of that way because of the way the moon was positioned that day. And maybe it was a little bit later. Maybe it was like 11 to 12 or something like that. But it was in the middle part of the day, and the moon was in the sky. And and about 2 o'clock, it was like a light switch turned off. I never seen another deer the rest of the evening. I mean, it was, and I even thought to myself at that time and started, when it did slow down like that, I'm like, man, I need to get out of here and go set on a food source or something like that. But I stuck it out because I seen that big one that I was after. And, but, to me, I remember going back that night and just kind of like sitting in my truck, and I was looking at, I looked at my phone and looked at that moon guide. I was like, man, that thing it's on the money. I mean, I know there's a lot of guys that say, there's guys that say that it doesn't have effect. Well, I mean, then I think if you talk to any guy that has a fishing charter, then why they every one of those guys are. I mean, they strongly believe in it. So I mean, to me, and you know, the years that I've spent in the woods, to me, there's a lot of truth to that moon. Um, but I think there's a magic window. It's like the 5 days leading, like 5 days of the rising moon, and then there's like a 3 or 4 day time span where it's full moon. It's kind of shut off a little bit, and on the rising moon, the evenings are great, and then on the backside of that, there's another 5 days, and then to me, it's like, and then the mornings are really good. That's just been my observation, and that's just my 2 cents on it.
And do you think that midday time, that 10 to 2 time is times up with the mornings? That's kind of that same time period, or you're saying that's after the mornings?
That's after the mornings.
Okay, so you've got that 5 days after the full moon where it's mostly mornings, and then after that, there was like you saying that's like 2 to 3 days ish in that
Yeah,
middle of the day.
then there's a time span that kind of goes on in there, and then you get into another spot of that moon phase there where, because I'm trying to break it down in just the most simplest way to understand it, is there's a time frame after that full moon, after those two phases I just talked about. There's another time span in between there where you're more into like the blacked out phase and stuff like that,
Yeah.
where there's a span in there that in the middle part of the day can just be dynamite. But I don't think it's like that during the early season. I don't think that's a moon phase that you use during the early season or a moon phase that you use during the late season. I think that's a moon phase that you use during November during the rut. I think it's just going to enhance the movement and you know make your midday hunt much better.
That's not marked on the moon guide. So do you have an idea of generally when, how long? Is it basically just like you said during that blackout period? Is that the best way to kind of identify it?
Yeah, yeah. There's a spot in there that it just happens. It's on those days, think about like you're driving down the road or whatever, and it's 11, 12, 1 o'clock, and in the middle of the day the moon's out
Mm-hmm.
and you can see it. That's it.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting too because I before the podcast today, I had to go out and I was doing, which is something I'm gonna ask you about in a minute. But I lost my lease last year, and so I've been trying to get permission on some places, and it's just been a nightmare around here in South Carolina. Like, just there's land everywhere, and it literally seems like no one will give permission on any of it. But I went and I was going to knock on a couple doors, and I pulled in to this one place. It's small. It's only about 8 acres, but it's pretty close to my house. And literally it was 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and there's three does out there feeding like 20 feet inside his driveway, wide open. And
Hmm.
then, and I was kind of like, oh, that's odd. That's not normal. And then I saw two deer feeding by the side of the road, literally a half mile down the road as I like left that property. And all of a sudden a bell kind of went off my head, and I like pulled my phone out and looked at the moon guide, and I'm like, oh, it's a red moon right now.
Yeah. Did
Literally,
you
I mean,
see did you see the moon in the sky at 12:30 today?
uh, I didn't notice it. No, I didn't even know. But I mean, that makes a ton of sense because I really hadn't been tuned into it right now because we're not doing anything. But that makes a ton of sense because I was like, why are there deer everywhere? And then I looked at the moon guide. But so it was all it was at 12:30. You could see it.
Yeah, because today I'd left our office to go grab some lunch.
Uh huh.
And when I got in my truck, I looked up and the moon was out. Like I left the office like 12:15, 12:30 to go grab something to eat real quick, and I see and it was out. So that makes sense why they were out.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Adam can explain that way better than I can. He is super dialed into that, like the
Yeah,
science behind it.
I was going to say I
Mine's
won't
more
put
the
you on the
dumb.
spot about the science.
Yeah, mine is more the dumbed down version that just
It works.
the average guy like me can understand.
That well, I'm the same way. I'm not like if it. I'm just like one of those things where can I trust it or not? And everybody that I know that's a really good hunter, um, I don't have none of them say the moon doesn't matter. Now, obviously, almost all of them say the same thing you do, which is the weather is king. But
Oh, it is.
within the context of the weather, like the moon is a big deal, and everyone I know that's really good listens to it, and it makes a big difference. Um, I just kind of brought up permission. Like I'd love because I know that you have a lot of different properties that you hunt on. Most of them are permission properties. Can you give a few tips to people who are, and I'm one of those people who are, in an area where everyone seems to hunt. There's a ton of land. Maybe there's not even a ton of land, but it's hard to get permission. What are some things that you've done that have been successful getting permission on properties? And also, how do you look at it? Because I think some of us tend to, like, one of the things that I've kind of done in the last month or two, I started out with these big tracts of land, and now I'm kind of trying to not just say I'm looking at smaller ones too, and just kind of seeing, okay, what does that butt up against, and this and that. So, what are some things that you've done that have been successful to get you access?
I think the biggest thing is networking. And when I say networking, I mean you kind of always have your ears open in every conversation that's ever going on, and and if somebody mentions something or oh they live over here or whatever, like I think I drive my wife crazy with it because all of a sudden somebody say, "Yeah, I got 20 acres over there." I'm like, "Oh, really?" And she's already
Giving
giving me
you the
the
elbow.
eye. Yeah, because I know where she knows where it's going to go next. Where I'm
Yeah.
gonna. Um, I think just trying to. I think you know you got to have some kind of in these days, and knowing somebody um, that I mean that always helps. I mean, and at the end of the day, like you know, for some for someone to let you hunt their property, they have to feel comfortable with that, you know, and and we're just talking. I'm just talking bow hunting because that's just what I do. I'm
Yeah,
just a bow hunter.
I'm the same thing. That's same deal.
And so um, I do think that's a little more acceptable. I do think it's a little easier, but there's a lot of times where if I do stop and ask somebody, I'm like, maybe I ask them and during shed season or something like that. I'm like, hey, do you mind if I just go? I'm not asking for hunting. I don't say hunting. I just say, do you mind if I go look for deer antlers? And and just a lot of times they don't care. Some people, if there's guys in there hunting or something like that, they will. And then sometimes too, maybe I'm hunting a particular deer, and maybe there's a key piece or something like that. I mean, but there's been times where I'm like, hey, look, here's I'll go up to somebody's house. Hey, you know, here's the deal. Like, I am after one particular deer, and is it all right if I run a camera on your property just because I just want to know if he's coming through? I'm not asking to hunt or anything like that. And there's been plenty of people that are like, yeah, I don't allow any hunting, but I don't mind if you run a camera. So then I'll just run a camera. Well, having a camera in there creates you going back,
Mm-hmm.
creates more conversations, which then creates them getting comfortable with you. And then later, um, I would say 9 times out of 10, later with the little bit of back and forth, or maybe it was, maybe you shed hunted it, last year, and maybe you asked, maybe you went back in there and shed hunted again, and or and maybe just stopping by and saying, here's a gift card, to a place, or I know one particular guy, like, he loved bourbon, so I was like, okay, I got to get this guy a good bottle of bourbon. So I stopped over, gave him a good bottle of bourbon, and just breaking the ice, let him get to know you, let him know you're not some, just some dirtbag or whatever, or just some, person that's gonna, go in there and it's their property, that and you got to just get them to feel comfortable. And I think once you break that barrier down, I've had people before like, hey, do you want to hunt here? I'm like, I would love to hunt here. I just never wanted to ask you. And And then I've had other people too where I'm like, hey, um, I never asked you before, but would you mind if I hunted here? I've had people say, oh, I thought you were hunting here. I'm like, no, I've never hunted here. you
You
know,
told me I could hang a
and
camera.
yeah, so it's the long game. It really is. And I think just coming right out sometimes just I don't know if that's the way. In today's world, I think there's a lot of trust that's been broken with strangers that I think people are more hesitant to give others access. So, I just think I think if you go that route, I think that helps a lot. Having mutual contact, if you have mutual connections, having somebody introduce you to somebody, that's huge. But there's been the occasions too where I've just stopped and knocked on the door, and just like right off the rip, just you kind of feel the situation out a little bit, and you're like, I don't know, I kind of think I could ask permission. And then you ask, and they're like, yeah, I don't care. you know um but a lot of those times too, they're like, yeah, I got 4 other guys here that hunt here too. So you know I think you got to be a little strategic about it. I don't have the permission that I used to. um and not that I did anything wrong. It's There's been just so many pieces that I've had over the years that have either been bought and sold or developed, and just a lot of that kind of stuff has went on. So the days of me having 15 or 20 places to hunt, that is not the case anymore. It is getting. I need to get back out there uh, and do a better job of getting more access again.
Yeah, well, I've been getting a lot of no's, so that's but I have been starting with, now I've been very clear about that I'm only a bow hunter, but I think that's a good piece of advice to, potentially, ask for a camera or ask if you can go, look for antlers just as a very non-threatening way, just to see if, you could potentially get your foot in the door so that you can get, the opportunity to get to know them better over time. So I think that's a good point.
Facebook stalk them.
Yeah, I have tried to do
Facebook's
that. One of the things that I run into here, I don't know if y'all have the same thing up there, but literally 3/4 of the land is owned by some kind of trust. And then I got to go dig, through the county records to try to figure out who the trustee is. And half the time it's a corporation. It's like,
yeah.
we have a lot of timberland around here, so a lot of it ends up in some kind of corporate, entity.
I am not a Cincinnati Bengals fan at all. Not.
Yeah.
I grew up towards Ashland, like we were talking earlier. So I was more like northern central. So I was a Browns fan, unfortunately, and I still am today. That's why I have all this great. That's why I have all this great hair. But there was a guy one time that I Facebook stalked. He owned a piece of ground, and he was a big Bengals fan. My father-in-law is a Bengals fan, and I remember like, hey, I need one of your Bengals t-shirts so I can go knock on this guy's door. And
you wore the t-shirt, the Bengals t-shirt.
Yeah,
you try to ingratiate yourself.
I sucked it up and wore it, and it actually did lead to a pretty good conversation. It did lead to a piece of ground to hunt. So
that's sweet.
Then after a couple of years, I had to tell the guy, say, hey, remember when I wore that Bengals? I got to know him and become friends with him. I said, remember when I wore that Bengals t-shirt? He's like, yeah, this and that, whatever. I was like, I'm a Browns fan. He goes, why that? Why would you wear that? So it created it. He got a big kick out of it. And I hunted his place for years until he sold it. And but I think you just got to break the ice with these people. And the bottom line is you got to break the ice and make them feel comfortable with you. That's it.
Yeah.
And then once you get it, then it's a job.
Keep giving them some love. That's right. Like don't just accept it and never show up again, right?
I have some older folks that give me permission now to hunt. And every once in a while I'll just I tell my wife, I'm like, hey, I gotta go over and stop in and check on them. It's not hunting season, anything like that, but
right.
Because you become friends with these people and stuff like that, and you do care about them and stuff. So, I just, have to go over and just, check in. Hey, how you doing? Make sure, everything's all right. Plus, some of the older folks, they give you permission to hunt, they're getting up there in age or whatever, and maybe they need a hand, doing whatever, maybe it's a tree that fell over in their yard and they want to, they want to get it out of the yard and get it cut up and out of there or whatever, I've done that before where I've just taken a chainsaw over and cut up a tree or something like that just to help them out. But once you get permission, doesn't mean that's it. I mean, now you gotta take care and protect that relationship.
Yeah. Be a good human.
Yeah.
So right when we got on, I sent you a snapshot, and I want to throw a scenario out to you that is interesting. But I think you said that you've run into this situation a number of times, and I think anyone who hunts any kind of ag, land is going to run into this scenario. So you've got it. Why don't you describe it better than probably I would? But my biggest question is so there's a big strip of timber that's got a bunch of fingers running off of it, and at the south end of it there are two big ponds that are surrounded by a ton of CRP, and those does bed around those ponds like crazy during the day. And then you can see right at dusk the bucks kind of leave the timber line and walk across the ag field to get over to those two ponds and that CRP where all those does are. It's the first time I had access to it last year, but that's a scenario that I'm not familiar with. How would you hunt that specific area?
So I've hunted a lot of stuff that looks like that. Um, and to me, I mean, especially in years that, I mean, if you're out there and whether, if it's standing corn or something like that, that's in those fields, it's going to be tough to see. It's also going to be super tough to, to access.
So
Um,
it's let's say it's the rut, right? Which is one of the reasons those bucks are going out there, all the time, and the corn's down at that point.
okay. So in my opinion, I would take a little bit of time and set up um, to observe that movement and just try to before I went diving right in there and I would take more of that approach, especially with as big as those fields are and stuff. Um, I mean, there's a lot of glassing opportunities right there. Um, so then, when you do make a move, you're making an educated, calculated move. At that point, you're not just randomly going in and setting up. But when I would go in to set up, I mean, you want to be, for one, you want your head on a swivel and you want to be looking at the sign. You want to be looking for those great big tracks and you want to be looking for, the big rubs, scrapes, stuff like that, and start kind of dissecting it in your mind or whatever. Like I always like to kind of like visually lay these things out in my head. Like I seen what I seen and I seen this deer doing whatever. But then when I get in there, now it's time to like zero in on, you know, that you want to, I mean, you're bow hunting, so you got to be, you want to be within 20 yards of whatever trail or area that this deer might be coming out of, to try to get down to where those ponds are and where those does are bedding. So to me, I would be looking at that finger that comes out after like where the big timber is right there. I would
Mm-hmm.
look at that in that area, somewhere in that general area. I would bet that those bucks are either staying in the cover more than likely, because if you didn't see them, then they're probably staying in that cover, and maybe you can't see them or whatever. But and I would check both sides of that, because that finger leading down there, they to me, they're using that. They gotta be. It's got it. Is it tore up in there?
So I didn't go in. I hunted right around it, but I think my mistake last year was I didn't go in there because I was
Mm-hmm.
afraid I was going to blow it up, and so I hunted around it. And to the north part of that finger, like kind of there's a big wide finger that opens into that cornfield on the south, and then it kind of gets a little skinny before it opens up into that big spot north. And I hunted right on the south side of that little pinch point. Kind of my thought was that I could get them traveling from the north to the south as they moved into stage potentially in that area, but I didn't actually go into that thick where they probably were staging up. So that's probably a mistake that I made, was I didn't go in there and get enough intel. I made some assumptions.
Yeah, I think you're going to be kind of, if you didn't see the deer do what by using some binoculars or spotting scope or something like that. I think then that kind of forces you into like you have to get in there. But I don't know. I would probably get in there regardless, just so I can paint the entire picture.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's so that way I didn't miss the opportunity that I had. Like maybe I set back and was a little more like I'll set back a little far, but and then you seen the deer do, and it's November when you're out there hunting during a rut,
Yeah.
and you seen that deer do that one time. What if he goes down there? Now what if he goes all the way down there and finds a doe that is starting to smell good a little bit, and I mean, who knows where he's going to take her? He might have her out in the middle of that wide open field out on a fence row or something like that. And then you're on the short window and you didn't get that crack. Now you're, that one chance that you got, it's kind of gone at that point.
And so when you say go in there, are you saying go in there like and go scout it like midday to see what everything looks like in there? Or are you saying go in there and set up, but scout it before you set up?
So the way that I would approach that, I would go in there, um, that 11, 12 o'clock time frame, whatever. And this is kind of how I hunt out of state. I kind of hunt a little bit differently in state and here than I do out of state. Out of state, I'm a different.
Well,
I'm two different
keep
hunters.
going, keep
Yeah.
going, because literally my next series of questions all are about travel, like traveling out of state and hunting. So just stay on your path because that's where I'm going.
Okay. So if I was out of state on that trip, then I'm going to go in there and um, I'm going to go in there midday. I'm going to scout that out and I'm going to
Mm-hmm.
hang my set. I'm going to find out exactly. I'm going to try to cut those big tracks and locate some of those big rubs, whatever. And maybe there's no big rubs in there. Maybe there's no scrapes, but a big track typically never ever, never lies. And I'm going to try to get set up to catch that movement. And I'm also going to be at the same time, I'm going to be looking what is the wind doing tomorrow? And, and so like maybe it's going to completely switch. Maybe I need to hang two stands. I don't know, based off the win. And I've done that before in the middle of the day. I've hung two sets. Um, but I'm going to have one for this evening for sure. And then I'm going to get in it and hunt it. And if that deer doesn't come out and I don't get a shot, or then I'm going to leave all my stuff in the tree and I'm going to come right back and climb right in. I mean, a lot of times I leave everything, my bow and everything in there, and then I'll come right back in. And then if I don't see that deer on on that morning or evening set, then then I'm going to get down and I'm going to scout again, and I'm going to have to go a little bit deeper and just and that's just going to be a process that I just continue to do until either I kill the deer or I see the deer. If I see the deer and he's doing something, then say it's a morning hunt, then I'm moving for that evening. Wherever I seen him go into, I will be set up outside of that. And I will try to get as close as I possibly can. Now, if it's an evening hunt, then that makes it a little trickier because I'm not going to go tearing that thing down, at the end of the night in my hunt. I've done it. I've not had a lot of success doing it this way, and then go back in the dark and hang it. If I do that, then I need to know the exact tree that I'm going to in the morning. And the other part of that is too, I don't want to spend a bunch of time getting very high in the tree. Um, because the more time I spend getting high in the tree is the more movement and the more noise that I'm bringing to that area. So, um, if I can get a stick or two off the ground and I'm in the cover, then that's that's my game. That's what I'm going to do. I hunt a lot like that out of state. Um, there's a lot of midday scouting, hang, come back to the same tree, hunt it, and tear down, repeat, 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 repeat. That's kind of what I've always done.
And so, like, let's say that first scenario we were talking about, and they're feeding out into that field. You go in there, you're cutting good tracks. Are you setting up right in the middle of that thing? Or are you setting up more like where you thought they were coming out of, closer to the field edge with your wind, blowing out to the field edge?
Closer to where they're coming out. I wouldn't try to sit in
Gotcha.
the middle
That's
of
what I
that
figured.
thing.
Yeah.
Because I think we get ourselves in trouble sometimes trying to hog too many trails.
Yeah.
Um, I think sometimes because I've done that. I've been guilty of that where it's like I want to be able to shoot every trail, right? Well,
Right.
that has gotten me busted a lot. It's gotten me winded a lot. I would rather be like, okay, like take my best educated guess and then again follow my gut. Following your gut will lead to more deer kills than anything. And there's been so many times where I didn't follow my gut, and I'm like, and then next thing I know, the deer's going by the location I said I should have always been in anyways, and I didn't follow my gut. But I think trying to hog up too many trails, I think that kind of gets you in trouble. I think you got to set up on like one or two trails, and that's like you know your highest percentage because everybody wants like the perfect win too to hunt every spot. Well, you got to give up something because you got to think too, like you know he's got to feel comfortable enough to walk in that area. And if you take away all of his senses, if it's a thick area, he's going to be relying on his nose a lot to move through there. Where if it's an open area, then maybe he will not rely so heavily on the wind, but he'll also rely on his eyes or whatever. So you got to kind of factor all those things, you know.
So when you hit a new spot, and you mentioned this earlier, you obviously when you'll e-scout it, which you can get some idea around. So when you get to a spot and you're going out of state, and let's say you haven't been there before, is the first thing you're doing you're glassing like that? Is that where you start, or do you? Because I know a lot of people like they e-scout it, they see what they think and then they go straight in. Like, what's the first thing you do when your boots hit the ground in a new spot out of state and you're
So
traveling?
if it's a brand new spot I've never been to, and
Yep,
all I've had the chance to do is e-scout it.
yep. You don't have any intel from friends or anything. You're somebody may have said, yeah, you can hunt on it, but it's you're coming in blind other than e-scouting.
So if it's the first day, and I get there and say it's noon, and I get there or whatever, I might take the evening and just do some glassing and maybe do some glassing first thing in the morning or whatever. But then I have to get boots on the ground because you can e-scout all you want. Um, I think there's a lot of value in it, but I also think that I've been I've been fooled too of what I thought based off of some e-scouting versus what was once I put boots on the ground and got in there and looked around, it wasn't it wasn't what I pictured in my head. And I've went into lots of farms before where it's like I would have swore it was going to be tore up in this area, and then just based off of e-scouting, and then I go to another part of that same farm and it's shredded where I wouldn't have thought it was like that. It was
Mm.
just but if I got there, I got there, you know, say I got there in the morning, I would just, I might glass first thing in the morning or something like that. But then middle of the day, I'm scouting. I have to put my boots on the ground, but I do like to set back a lot too. But if it's a brand new piece, there is nothing worse than sitting there and not knowing what's over the next ridge.
that's
I
that's the
can't
reason.
take
One
it.
of the reasons I asked the question is because I had that situation in Missouri last year. Was like it was all brand new, and I was constantly like, okay, I'm getting some activity here, but none of them are shooters. Do I stay here? Do I go, check out that next, spot that's a couple hundred yards up that I'm seeing seeing them travel to? That's always and I think a lot of us have this tendency to play it safe, and that's why I asked you that question.
I'll say this too. So say if I'm going out of state and hunting something new I've never been onto, it could be 12 hours away, and all you got is a weekend. Well, I'd say on Friday after work, you get your tail in that truck and you start driving, and you get out there like in February, March, April, whatever it might be, and you spend one day of just burning up your some boot leather and get an understanding of how it lays, and then And then if it takes you all the whole next day to drive back or whatever, because, or maybe that night after you got done scouting, and maybe you got like something going on Sunday and you have to be back home for the family or whatever. Like, it sucks, but you got to do it. And you just jump back in the truck and you just start heading back. And that one day of scouting and just getting an understanding and then getting home and now be able to pull out, you know, Onyx or Spartan Forge or whatever that you
Mm-hmm.
use. And now when you dig through that and look at that, you'll understand it way more. And then when hunting season does come around and you get the opportunity to go out there to hunt, you are miles ahead. But you're just going to have
That's
to
such a good piece of advice.
you're just going to have to, if you got 12 hours there and 12 hours back, you're just going to have, 24 hours of driving, and it is what it is. That's what these podcasts are for. You just put in a
Yeah.
podcast and you just zone out and listen to them. And
I could drive all day long because I just love listening to this stuff. Like I love listening to
yeah,
people, like listening to you talk, listening to Andy talk, that kind of stuff. I can listen to it forever. And I think the point you made so good because you either put in the time now, even though there's a lot of, rubber on the road, or you get there blind and you spend half your hunt just trying to figure out the lay of the land. Because like you said, at that point, you're in the season, you're tentative about where you're going in. You don't want to screw up this spot. I'm not sure if I should go in here. You may spend, 2 days just figuring it out. And if you go do it now, at least you know where everything is. And just like one of the points you made earlier, right? If you're going in, especially in the dark, you know which tree you're gonna hang. And if you haven't walked even the property at all, you don't even know what it's gonna be like. You don't know where it's thick, you don't know where it's thin. You look at like I had a situation in Missouri last year where it looks like, oh, there's a creek running through there. What ends up that thing's like 12 feet deep,
yeah,
all the way
I've had
through.
that happen.
It's not a
Yeah.
freaking creek. And it completely changes the way they travel. I thought it was like some little creek they could hop over. So just being there is such a big deal. That's awesome piece of advice. I really appreciate everything you've said. Like there's so much knowledge in there. Where can people like find more of your stuff if they want to go watch? Because I know you've got stuff on YouTube with Whitetail Addictions and all that stuff. So where do people find you?
So I've been part of Lone Wolf for over 20 years now. Anywhere there's Lone Wolf custom gear, you can come check us out. Andre's son Cody DeQuisto has it's called the Whitetail Roadshow. This year, I'll be speaking at the one in Ohio, which is in August, and then I'll be speaking at the one that they hold on their farm in Iowa in late August.
Where are those dates? If somebody wants to look those dates up, where are those, Justin?
If they go to the Whitetail Roadshow,
Okay.
you can see all the different dates on there for those. There's one in Georgia this year. There's I think he's doing four or five this year total.
Gotcha. Okay.
But I'm just going to speak at the one at because we have our annual get together for Whitetail Addictions the day before the Whitetail Road Show at the Quisto Farm, and then and then we have Whitetail Addictions, which is on YouTube, and just me and a bunch of my buddies, and we just film our hunts and have a little fun with it, and all just a bunch of really good dudes, really, really some of the best whitetail hunters that I know of. And, um, you said earlier that, you started this podcast, to be able to learn from some other guys or whatever. Well,
Yeah.
it's kind of the same. I didn't start a podcast, but I surrounded myself with a whole bunch of dudes that are really, really good hunters. And it's really, I've, I've been really blessed to be around those guys for the last 20 something years, and they're some of my best friends.
Yeah, that's a really special thing. I mean, and it's hard to get I think I can't remember somebody told me this when I was young, but they said if you can get 5 people that are really willing to pour into you, that you can pour into over the course of your life, then you've been blessed like hugely for the impact of those people. So the fact that you've got a group of guys like that, and you've been friends that long, and you've been tied into this thing that you love together for that long is amazing, amazing stuff. I appreciate you being here, Justin. Thank you so much for your insight on everything. Go check out Whitetail Addictions on YouTube. It's awesome. And if you get a chance to go listen at the Whitetail Roadshow, that would be great. Thanks so much for being here, brother.
Thanks,
All the
man.
best. Yeah.
Appreciate
God
it.
bless you, man.
Thank you.